Hi, my name is Pete Hamill and I'm the author of Embodied Leadership. And in previous videos, I've talked a little bit about leadership and about some of the leadership programs that we're bringing to the UK with Strozzi Institute. Um, but in this video, I'd like to talk a little bit more about what we mean by embodied or somatic in the context of leadership, because it's often a question that people have. They want to know what's the difference, or what's different about embodied leadership? What makes it unique? So let me talk about embodied, and there's two ways that I want to talk about embodied. The first one is the level of learning, and the second one is to look at the role of actually the physical body in learning about leadership. So the first one, embodiment. So when we talk about embodiment and we talk about embodiment as a level of learning, what we're looking at is the ability to learn to do something different, to learn to do that consistently, and to learn to do that when under pressure. Now, if you think of a traditional leadership development program, you may go and you will learn some theories and models, and you'll learn some stuff about yourself and some self-awareness, and you'll have lots of information. Or if you read a book, you'll have lots of information, some models and theories. But does that give you the ability to do something different consistently and when under pressure? The chances are probably not. The chances are in those moments what you have is you have some really, really good information, and then you come into the situation and somebody challenges you, or your boss says, can I see you in my office, or whatever it is. You get that email, you know, those emails that kind of feel like a punch in the stomach and you want to react to. Yeah, that happens. And the chances are in those moments, what you do and how you respond is how you habitually respond. It's how you've always responded. It's what you're good at doing. It's what comes out of you in those moments. It's not something that you sit back in that moment and go, oh yes, what was that intellectual model that I looked at when I'm really under pressure and I'm time pressured and I need to get something done? What was that model? What was that theory? And how can I put it into practice here? Generally not. Generally what happens is in those moments, we do what we've historically done. So embodiment at a level of learning, is much more than knowing a model or a theory. It's much more than knowing about something or having heard about it or knowing the buzzwords of leadership and management or having read that book even. It's something much more fundamental than that, which is I can actually do something different than I did before, and I can do that even when I'm under pressure. That's a pretty high level of learning. And when we look at embodied leadership, when we look at the programs that we run with embodied leadership, the coaching that we do, that's the level of learning that we're seeking to achieve. The second thing that I talked about was the physical body. So why would we include the physical body? Well, let's go back to, we'll look at some neuroscience research. We'll look at the work of a neuroscientist called Antonio Damasio, and he looks at what are called somatic markers. And basically what he says is, if you can imagine for a moment, if you go back to a time when you were really embarrassed, and if you think about that, if you bring that moment back into your mind, what you'll probably notice is that the memory just doesn't come back as like a cognitive thought in your head. But in that moment, you feel and experience the same set of emotions that you felt in that moment when you were actually embarrassed. You'll feel like you want the world to swallow up and kind of for you to disappear, and all of the stuff that you felt, that feeling in the pit of your stomach that you experienced. And that is what he would call a somatic marker. And it's because when we're in those high pressure situations, we don't have time to sit and think about all the intellectual models we've come across and all the things we know and all the stuff that we've ever heard about. When we're in those really high pressure situations where the pressure's on us and we're reacting and we need to respond, what we do and what we're guided by is our sense of history, our sense of what's happened before and what will allow me to be safe, effective, and move forward. And so these somatic markers are like an emotional soundtrack to our experience. They're the emotional memory that got embedded in that embarrassing moment that tells us when we walk into a situation that's very similar to that even. A situation that's similar to that core moment where we got that embarrassing, it will kind of come back to us in that moment, and it will give us that sense of, okay, we're back in that situation again. We need to take action to make ourselves more comfortable in order to not be embarrassed. Now, at some level, that's great. That's a wonderful self-protection mechanism. It's a great part of who we are. And not all of the somatic markers that we have are helpful to us. Some of them are downright unhelpful to us. So we walk into a networking situation, we feel that feeling that we feel because we've got to try to get into a conversation, and everybody's seems to be in the midst of conversations. Now, how do we break our way in? And so some people just walk to the side of the room and play with their BlackBerry for a while, trying to pretend to be busy. Some people will try to go to the center of things and confront the dominant person in the room, etc. People will do different things in order to manage that core anxiety that they feel in that moment, the feeling of discomfort that they feel, which is generated by the somatic marker. And we all do that. We all do that all of the time. We have these somatic markers that come up from our past experiences, that guide us and that cause us to act in particular ways. And what we do in those moments is we act to make ourselves more comfortable. How we get more comfortable will be different for each person. For some people, it will be retreating from the situation. For some people, it will be engaging. But it's all about making ourselves more comfortable in the space of that discomfort. So, you're in a situation at work, there's some conflict going on. It's one of those areas where we're going to have a somatic marker. We're not particularly good at dealing with conflict as human beings. You can see that from the history of the last couple of 100 years. So what happens to us in that moment is it's a charged situation, and we'll respond how we've historically responded. We will do what we do because we will feel that discomfort of a past conflict situation, and we will respond by moving away from it, by engaging in it, by doing what we do. And the same pattern will play out that we normally get. And we'll do it before we've consciously thought about it. And that feeling, that experience arises inside of our body. It's the feeling of discomfort that we experience that causes us to move in a particular way. Embodiment is about starting to learn to do something different. And we learn to do something different by feeling and experiencing that discomfort, that core level of discomfort that we feel inside of ourselves, which shows up below the chin. It doesn't show up here like an idea. It shows up in our bodies. And we experience that and we face it and we be with it rather than immediately reacting to it. So in those moments, we learn how to do something different and how to be choiceful, rather than just doing what we've historically done. That's the core of mindfulness, it's the core of effectiveness, it's the core of martial arts, where we've got to learn to overcome the very basic aspects of our conditioned responses and learn how to choose more effective responses. And it's the same in organizations. It's the same basic principle in conversational space as it is in the physical space of martial arts. So when we look at learning to lead from an embodied perspective, we're looking at how do we do what we do? How do we do what we do on an ongoing basis? And what you'll see is that we play out the same responses at a physical level as we do at a mental and emotional level. So somebody who gets really aggressive inside of those situations, you'll see that aggression coming out physically. Someone who gets really retreats in those type of situations, you'll see that retreat coming out physically. And we can start to pay attention to that. And if we practice doing something different and we practice it enough times, then what we'll see is that that person will be able to move back into the organization space and do something concretely differently, consistently, and when under pressure. But it's by practicing doing something different physically that we learn how to do something different emotionally and mentally. Now that may sound a little weird as a kind of a claim, but actually if you look at the research on the parts of our brain that are activated in those moments, it's the older parts of the brain like the amygdala, they have greater connections back to the body than they do to the more recent parts of the brain, the neocortex, that we use for rational thought. That's why you can't rationalize yourself into a whole new set of behaviors. If you've ever tried to do New Year's resolutions or rationalize your way into exercise, it doesn't work. The body is a much more effective way to get back into those conditioned habits, because the connections actually exist to that part of the brain and the body, and it will actually start to change things for you. The embodied leadership programs and the embodied leadership coaching is about formulating a series of practices that will actually start to resculpt the brain, that will actually start to give us more choices, more options inside of those moments of pressure. And those moments of pressure may look like conflict. They may look like situations where we've got to actually step on stage and take leadership of it in front of an audience. It may look like situations where we've got to actually say no to our boss, something that's very important, something that we need to learn to be able to do. It may look like actually making requests for the things that we really need. It may look like standing our ground in situations where people are taking away our dignity. All of those sorts of things are crucial moments that we need to learn to be able to do something different in if our historic patterns are getting in our way. Now, why would we do that? Well, the question becomes, if I go back to an earlier video where I was speaking about leadership, leadership is about what we're committed to, what we care about. So the question in this becomes, what are we committed to, what do we care about, and who do we need to be to deliver on what we care about? And actually, if those historic patterns, if those somatic markers are getting in the way of us delivering on the things that we care about, of us taking leadership and actually making things happen in the world that we really want to be different, then it's essential that we do this work to learn how to do something different. It's work that's not just about self-awareness and knowing models or theories. It's about going one step beyond that in self-cultivation. Cultivation of the ability to respond effectively under pressure in all sorts of different situations, and to respond in a way that will get the job done and that will actually allow us to be effective. In that way, embodiment, while it may seem a little bit weird to work with the physical body, it's hugely pragmatic, it's hugely practical, and it's hugely about delivering the results that you want. If you're interested in finding out more about it, please read my book, look at the ideas that are inside of that, but also get in contact. Speak to me about the programs that we offer, the coaching that's available, and I can tell you a lot more about that. Thank you.